I did the unthinkable. I shot an entire short film on the Tamron 28-75 in autofocus. General wisdom says you should always use the manual focus and not use autofocus when you're filmmaking, but I decided to do it, and let's talk about why, let's talk about the results, and let's talk about would I do this method again. I'd actually planned to shoot the whole pirate film on the Helios 44-2, which is a manual focus old Soviet lens that I really love the characteristics of, but the logistics of the production, I was in Hawaii for just a few days. We only had 2 days to shoot it, and the Helios being a 58mm, it's not necessarily the most versatile focal length, and I really needed a lens where I could be wide and then tight and just shift things around. And obviously with a short film, you want to have a consistent look to it. And I'd only brought the Helios and the 28-75 lenses to Hawaii because I only had limited space. So I made the decision literally well in Hawaii, like the night before the shoot, okay, we're going to use the Tamron. And the Tamron is not a super reliable, repeatable manual focus lens, and I knew that it worked quite well as an autofocus lens. So I made the decision, because we were under a very, very tight production schedule, that I was just going to trust the autofocus and see how it went. In an ideal situation, I would have had a cinema zoom or a set of different cinema primes. Another factor was that, partly because of time, partly because of the aesthetic look that I wanted for the film, I shot the entire film handheld. I had like handles and stuff, but it was all handheld, and so I wasn't really going to be able to easily, turn the focus ring and really get precise with it, and that was going to be tricky. So autofocus again just made so much sense. So what worked with this? As expected, Sony's autofocus worked like 98% of the time really, really well. It kept what I wanted in focus. It wasn't, focus hunting or being distracting. It locked on very well. I used the spot autofocus a lot of the time to really keep it locked in on the subject as I wanted them, and that worked fantastic. I also, used tap to focus sometimes to make sure that my subject was really locked in if they were moving, like during the fight scenes, things like that, and it worked fantastically. It definitely allowed my actors to move a little bit more freely in the scenes without me having to really try and rack focus and messing up scenes because, the focus wasn't perfect. Even if it was like a really good take on the actors, it kind of took some of that pressure off, where it's like, okay, we know it's going to be locked in, we know it's going to be good, I can monitor it, I can check it, and it seems to be working really, really well. So it allowed faster shooting, it allowed far fewer takes that were messed up because of technical issues, things like that. But what didn't work? There were a few times when the autofocus did have a hiccup, and a couple of them unfortunately did have to make it into the film, where just for a second, like, it would focus on the back really quick and then focus back on the actors, or focus close and then back on the actors. There are 2 spots in the film where just for a half a second, like, the focus is lost, and I only did 1 take of each of those moments and really needed to use those shots because the storytelling just wouldn't have made sense without it. The other piece is I lost some artistic element to the filmmaking that you really get with those manual lenses, where you're really choosing the focus, and sometimes the camera just doesn't want to do that, or I was not even thinking in that way, because when you're using a manual lens, when you're in that mode, in that zone, it's much easier to think about what's important to be in focus, what cool shots can I get, what rack focuses can I do, all this kind of stuff. And I really didn't think in that way because I had the autofocus lens, and so ultimately it led to a situation where I really didn't have a lot of those cool artsy rack focuses or more artistic shots that you might see in some of my other films. And I feel like this was a disadvantage of relying on the autofocus and thinking in kind of the autofocus mentality, where there might have been some really interesting shots where you have, you know, actors slightly out of focus in the background, maybe some cool shots while they're fighting where you've got, you know, like somebody who's died in the foreground, like just lying there dead, and you see, you know, out of focus people fighting in the background, or more artistic shots of, for example, the, you know, the necklace, or different things like that where, you know, could have been a little bit better. So I feel like those two things where you had those moments where the autofocus did glitch out, and which again were very rare, but they did happen, or you're not thinking in that truly artistic manner. Those two things are things that I feel like did hurt the film in small ways. So that brings us to the question of, would I use this method again? And if the situation demanded it, if it was a matter of, am I getting this film done or not? Am I able to shoot this in a timely manner, stay on schedule or not? Absolutely, I would absolutely use this method again without hesitation. But I do have a few caveats with that. I would make sure that every important take I got at least twice in case the autofocus did glitch out, but it actually worked so much better than I thought, and I was really surprised. I still much prefer to use manual focus. I think there's just something magical about manual focus when it comes to short films, and there's just that aesthetic, there's just that fun of shooting with manual focus, honestly, that I really enjoy in the short film process. And I ultimately think that it makes for kind of a more seamless experience for the viewer who's just used to that manual focus look. But at the same time, I don't feel like anybody who watched the pirate film was thinking, oh my gosh, this is just complete trash because he used autofocus. Probably most people didn't even know if I used autofocus or manual focus because it worked incredibly well. But there is an element to it where I definitely think that if I had the choice and it wasn't going to negatively affect the film, the production schedule, that kind of stuff, I will definitely continue to use manual focus, particularly if I can get dedicated manual focus lenses, you know, like the Helios 44-2, cinema lenses. It's just so much of a better experience as the filmmaker, and so much of a better experience, I think, ultimately for the viewers. You're able to get more artistic with it. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever filmed a short film with an autofocus lens, how it worked for you. Would you ever try it if you haven't? And if you did try it, would you try it again? I would love to know in the comments what you think. And if you want to see how I got the audio with the Rode Wireless Go 2, make sure to check out this video right now.